week, and welcome to this special roundtable that's dedicated to all things tenant-led scrutiny in the world of council housing. So it's brilliant to have you all with us today. I understand we're going live as well out to our YouTube channel and also to our other social media platforms as well at TPAS England. So a big hello to people who are joining us out there as well. Before we get started in terms of introductions, I want to say a big thank you to Justin at North West Leicestershire for hosting today's meeting, and I'm just going to bring him in to start with to just set the scene a little bit and say hello. So over to you, Justin.
Thank you, Louise. Okay, my name is Justin O'Brien and I work for, as Louise said, North West Leicestershire District Council. I think it's really good that we've got this platform for local authority scrutiny, and that we're all sitting here talking today, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to share some good ideas and good practice. I'm not sure if any of you attended the webinar that was on this morning that Dr. Dave McKenna presented and hosted. So he did a piece of research that NWLDC contributed to along with 3 other providers, and we're going to talk about that research today and what was identified in that research as what's good for scrutiny and what can we do moving forward. So the research is available now. I've had a quick scan of it this morning, so it's available via the TPAS website, or if you're subscribed to the newsletter, you should have received an email about it this morning. So I think, yeah, just welcome. I'm hoping that we're going to share lots of good ideas and good practice and find out how we're all getting on in this kind of strange time at the moment. So welcome.
Brilliant. That's lovely, Justin. Thank you ever so much for that. Thank you for giving us that background and introduction to today's session. So should we get things started then? What I'm going to suggest we do first is just go around everyone so you can say hello. So I will bring you in individually. And then I wondered if you would just be able to describe very briefly how scrutiny takes place in your particular local authority. So if you can say who you are, where you're from and how scrutiny is done in your local authority, that would be fabulous. So in no particular order, I'm going to go around my screen and come to Mary first, if that's okay, Mary.
Hiya, can you hear me?
We can indeed, Mary, yeah.
My name's Mary Jakes and I'm the chair of Rotherham Federation, and we have a scrutiny panel made up of tenants and residents, and we have monthly meetings, and our lead officer on it is an independent from the council. She works for Kirklees Council, and we work really well with our council regarding scrutiny. I don't want to say too much because everybody else wants to introduce herself, don't they? I don't want to take it all up, so I'll probably get a bit later on. All right, Louise, is that all right?
That's fantastic, that, Mary. Yeah, don't give us too much too soon.
No, that's what I say, yeah.
Coming back to you, absolutely. No, that's good to hear about the good relationship that the Federation has with the council when it comes to scrutiny. Brilliant. Next, I'm going to go to Eileen, please.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Eileen Barras. I'm from Northumberland County Council's Housing Department. We used to be in Almo until about 4 years ago, and now we're in council, so everything's still rather new, working with councillors and moving forward, because we had a 3-year transition period. So hopefully I'll get some good insight that will help us go forward from today.
Brilliant. Yeah, great to have you along, Eileen, and hopefully, yeah, we'll be sharing lots of good practice and tips for scrutiny. So brilliant, that's great. Thank you, Eileen. Next, I'm going to go to Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire Reid. I'm the engagement manager at Broxtowe Borough Council in the housing department, quite a small local authority on the west of Nottinghamshire. We've got about 4,400 properties. For the last couple of scrutiny reviews we've done, we've used a task and finish approach and also had input into how that's developed from our main resident involvement group.
Brilliant. That's great, Claire. Interesting to hear about the task and finish approach, and I'm sure we'll touch on that later. Thank you for that. Next, I'm going to go to Phil.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name's Paul Matthews. I'm currently chair of Swindon Borough Council Tenant Scrutiny Panel. The panel comprises solely of council tenants. There are about 10,500 social housing properties in Swindon. We have a multifaceted approach to scrutiny, which I'll go into later, but suffice it to say for the moment, we have a pretty good ongoing relationship with the council and its area managers, and we also have a good one-to-one relationship with our elected council cabinet member for housing, but more later.
Brilliant. That's great, Phil. Thank you for that. And I'm right in thinking that you are also part of the research as one of the case studies that Dave McKenna did as well with Justin. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Lovely to have you. Thank you, Phil. Next, I'm going to go to Rachel.
I'm on mute button, sorry. My name's Rachel McVeigh. I am a customer engagement officer at West Lancashire Borough Council. We have just less than 6,000 properties, so we have a traditional tenant scrutiny group, and there's 6 members on that currently, and I support them with different reviews and what areas they want to look at, and that's my role really.
Brilliant. That's great to hear. Thanks for that, Rachel. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about your panel that you work with in your bit of the world. Thank you. Helen, let's come to you next.
Hiya. I'm Helen Watson from the Gateshead Housing Company. I'm the Involvement and Diversity Lead. We have a customer scrutiny panel that's made up of tenants and leaseholders. They do scrutiny reviews based on performance information, complaints information, a range of different things. We're currently going through a housing review, and we may go back into the council, so I'll be interested to hear how that works as a local authority rather than an ALMO. But Simon is also in this roundtable today, and he's the lead. He leads the scrutiny panel, so we do support that panel with the reviews.
Brilliant. That's great, Helen. Thanks for that. And again, something in common, I think, with Eileen in terms of the ALMO coming back into the council. So it'll be interesting to see how that relationship changes when it comes to scrutiny. Thank you for that, Helen. Next, I want to go to Maureen.
Hiya, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah.
We can, Maureen. Yeah.
I'm Maureen Herdman. I work at Luton Borough Council. We've just literally set up a tenant scrutiny panel in the last few months. It's tenants and leaseholders. We've just done their terms of reference and they've decided on their first review. I'm probably working on a similar model to where I worked before, which is Stevenage, which was very similar to Helen's in the sense that we had a tenant and leaseholder panel. They looked at all the performance data and the complaints and annually selected a couple of areas that they would either do a very big review on or some quicker, simpler reviews. So really, I'm in the early stages at Luton. Oh, and it is a mixture of tenants and leaseholders. We've got 8,000 tenants and about 1,000 leaseholders.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Maureen. Again, interesting to hear that you've got a mix on the panel as well, and at a very early stage of your scrutiny journey. So it'll be interesting to see how things progress for yourselves in your bit of the world. Thank you, Maureen. Next, we're going to go to Bev.
Hi, so just to let you know, it's Nicola.
Oh, sorry, Nicola.
I'm using another iPad. This has been manic with technology, but yes, Nicola. So my name's Nicola Warren from Brent Council. Again, like Helen, we've got a customer experience panel, which is relatively new, just about a year new. We've had a lot of staff changes, including myself, management changes as well. So it's like we're starting from scratch, really. So basically what was important, we've got 4 people on our customer experience panel, which is our scrutiny for housing, and it was important for us to make sure it's diverse of, diversity, etc., different religions, race, etc. So that's what was really important to us, but it's going to be very good coming on this platform to learn what other people are doing, because like I said, we're starting a scratch basically.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Nicola. And again, really interesting point you touch on around the diversity of panels and, you know, how it's important for Scrutiny to reach out and ensure, you know, it's listening to all its customers and you know, that aspect very important. So thank you for that, Nicola. Next, we're going to go to Simon.
Hello.
Hello.
So, hi, I'm Simon Hand. I'm the Customer Involvement and Diversity Officer now for the Gateshead Housing Company. I think Helen's, my manager's already mentioned that I support our customer scrutiny panel, which there's currently 5 members. There's 4 tenants and 1 leaseholder. I think she's already mentioned the kind of way that they choose subjects. I think the big thing for us at the moment is the getting to grips with having meetings online and things like that, and giving them support to use their iPads and get on Microsoft Teams and things like that. So we've recently just finished a review, but I'll give a little bit more of an update on that one later.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Simon, and great to hear about how you're switching over to the digital means of scrutiny and sort of the challenges that may bring as well. But good to see that you've made the switch, definitely. Thank you for that. Next, I'm going to go, I think it's Nev. Nev, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
We can indeed, loud and clear.
I don't know why I can't. I don't think my camera's working.
Oh, not to worry, not to worry.
I'm not worried. I'm engaging, aren't I?
You are indeed.
You don't want to look at me anyway.
Yeah, no, fair play to you. We can definitely hear you, and that's the main thing. So you go for it.
Thanks, love.
Okay, so what I think, Nev, whereabouts are you from? Which is your which council are you from?
Hull City Council.
Hull, brilliant. Good
Right.
to have representatives from Hull with us. And again, you were one of the local authorities that contributed towards the research paper along with Swindon and with North West Leicestershire. So it's great to have you here representing Hull. Thank you for that, Nev.
Thank you.
Brilliant. So great group of people, all with different sort of experiences, all at different maybe parts of their journey on the scrutiny sort of path. So great to have you with us today. In terms of the discussion that we're going to have, what I've tried to do is frame it around the research paper that has been mentioned already and the webinar that was that took place this afternoon, because I think for us at TPAS England, it's really important that we give local authorities the space to be able to discuss some of the differences that are in place when it comes to scrutiny, and also, you know, celebrate some of the great work that local authorities are doing when it comes to scrutiny as well. So that's why we wanted to put this session on. And what we're trying to really sort of frame it around is these 10 success keys, I think Dr. McKenna identified in his research. So he identified 10 successful keys to scrutiny. And what we're going to do is have a look at each of these and hear from yourselves today some of your thoughts around where's your organisation at in relation to some of these success keys. And also, if you're not quite there or you have made it there, what are your tips or what are your aspirations really for achieving some of these success keys, if you like? So that's how we're going to frame the discussion today. Hopefully going to run sort of for about an hour or so, and then we may get some questions as well from our social media platforms that we'll try and pick up as well. So I hope everybody's okay with that and ready to get going with the questions. So the first one that I want to have a look at really is around the scrutiny process itself. And I think what the report talks about very much is the need to have a consistent and a robust approach to scrutiny, because obviously you want to make sure it's evidence-based in terms of the recommendations. You want to make sure that it's open and transparent in terms of how you're doing scrutiny. So having a robust and consistent approach, I think, is important. So want to hear from yourselves in terms of what your approach is. What is your process? We've heard what kind of groups or what kind of frameworks you've got, but when it comes down to the detail, what kind of process do you have in place? So I'm not going to go around everybody again. What I'm going to do is actually ask for people to contribute. So if you've got something to say on this, if you can either wave at me or put your name in the chat or put your hands up if you're feeling technically advanced. and we'll take contributions from yourselves. Okay, so let's have a look who we've got wanting to speak first, shall we, in terms of the hands up. Simon, thank you for that. Yeah, what's your approach and process?
Sorry, couldn't get a microphone on there. Well, I suppose the customer scrutiny panel look at different areas to choose how they're going to choose a subject, and then they have to kind of fill in a pro forma kind of approach to make sure that, like what you've said, there's evidence there. It's not just hearsay. Somebody said, "Oh, I've had a problem with this area of the business," or something like that. They have to be looking at a number of consistent approaches to see if there's been complaints in that area, if there's been any service failures. And then from that, they'll put the word forward that they're going to be looking into a certain area of the business and then plan how they're going to do it. Shall I just say a couple of things of what the kind of things that they do when they do that?
Yeah, that'd be
interesting
all right to hear. Yeah, absolutely.
So first of all, they'll probably do like a kind of a desktop approach, just to see what kind of things that team or that section might be looking at. But then they'll probably meet with the service manager of that section so they can get a good all-rounded idea of what that service does deliver. But the key point I think there is what it should deliver, because you're being told what the team does, but then you're looking back to make sure that that happens. And then other things that are key then is to speak to employees of that section to see if they have any blockages, if there's any departments that they kind of think we could be working better with, or any kind of things that are going differently that way. Looking at policies, but one of the big things, I'm talking for ages here, tell us to shut up if I'm going too far.
No, you're fine.
I think they do call upon task and finish groups if need be. So if they want to do things like mystery shopping, we'll have got some tenant experts in that area. So rather than them being bogged down by trying to do every single little thing, but I think the key thing for me with the group that we have at the minute is they have the confidence to go and speak with our managing director and ask questions, and they've got it to a level where everybody feels really comfortable with them. It's not like you against me. It's kind of a conversation kind of basis, which I think is working really, really well.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting to hear that. You know, I think it's a very flexible approach that you seem to have, and I love this idea that, you know, the panel's not trying to do it all. They will call on others that are involved in engagement to help out if needs be. And again, you know, so important that they're able to have the confidence and assurance that they can get the information that they need, do that desktop review. So it sounds as if there's some clear steps in place for your process, which is great. Thank you for that, Simon. Really interesting.
Okay. No worries, thank you.
Next, I've got Mary. Mary, what kind of approach do you have at Rotherham?
We discuss, our panel discuss what we think we ought to scrutinise, and up to now we've done 4 scrutinies. What we do is, as well, we invite officers to our meetings regarding whatever department it is, you know, to answer questions on how they do things. We do mystery shopping. We send questionnaires out to tenants, or we do face-to-face. The first one we did was on young people. We had a star report, and it came out that young people weren't happy because a lot of them live in flats. So we did a survey on that. Then what we do is we send a report at the end of the scrutiny to the council. We've had some really, really good feedback, and they do, believe it or not, they do take notice, you know. We've covered young tenants, repairs and maintenance, aids and adaptations, and antisocial behaviour. The last one is aids and adaptations, and we've not actually finished that yet due to the pandemic, and we're hoping to start again in a couple of weeks with a scrutiny. So that's about it, really.
No,
it's not about it, you know. I mean,
I'm going to say there was a lot there, Mary. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
because like we started in 2016, so I don't think we're doing too bad, you know.
Absolutely
It's engaging with tenants, isn't it, at end of the day, and asking what they want, you know. So.
And it's great to hear that, you know, you do lots of different sort of you've got lots of different methods, is it like surveys you talked about to get views, and the fact, you know, you're sort of looking at a wide range of subjects as well, from young people to you know, aids and adaptations. Fantastic. So that's great to hear. Thank you for that, Mary. Okay, anybody else want to come in? Claire?
Hi, yeah, our process has been developed with our main group, the resident involvement group. It is a mix of tenants and leaseholders. Members of that group do sit on our housing performance group, which is a working group of councillors and tenants that monitor the housing revenue account. They agreed that it should very much complement what we're working on in our housing business plan. So we take areas to that group, our priorities for that year, for them to decide where scrutiny should focus on. For the past couple of scrutiny reviews, we've used task and finish groups. So we invite people, whether it's through complaints that have been raised against that service, whether they're on our database, that they're interested in getting involved in that service area or review. We invite them along to a meeting where they get trained in their role within a scrutiny, and also the manager and lead officer for that service area is at that meeting, so they can give them information about the service area. They can ask questions and ask for information that they need to carry out that review. Then once they've had that information and they've had time to digest it, we'll look at reality checks that they want to carry out, whether that's site visits, surveys, mystery shopping, or if there's any other officers they think, you know, they want to come along to their meetings so they can ask questions of them. And also research, you know, good practice from other landlords that they can draw into their evidence.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting right at the end there, you talk about that sort of, you know, sort of benchmarking and looking at other landlords and looking at other sort of local authorities as well. And I think that's a real important part of scrutiny, isn't it? Because you can sort of look at all the information, but knowing, you know, what others are doing and comparing yourselves to others can be quite a powerful sort of tool, if you like, in scrutiny and deciding what to look at and which areas to focus on. Yeah,
definitely.
Brilliant. That's great, Claire. Thank you for that. Okay, anybody else want to talk about their process in terms of what they do? Phil. Oh, sorry, Phil, I've just got you on mute at the moment. So if you just want to unmute yourself, that'd be fab. Thank you.
Yeah, we take a sort of multifaceted approach. In a nutshell, we are solely made up of tenants, but we've all received training. Majority of the members of our tenant scrutiny panel have got up to CIH2 level, amongst other things. We can also, you know, we've joined in, we've been trained in tendering. Not that we join in the tender, obviously, because that could become a clash, but so we know what we're talking about when we're actually scrutinising tenders for various things. One example, the council runs its own, offers its own insurance, you know, for people's goods, etc., to all council tenants, which they've set up with, you know, being underwritten by insurance companies. So we might look at that. In fact, we were asked to relook at it because it's going out to tender, but although trained, the members of our group would never be involved in the tender. The things we look at come from principal areas. We meet weekly as a scrutiny panel, at least once a week. When it got a bit crazy about 18 months ago, we were doing 3-4 meetings a week because we had so many things going on at the same time, and it was monstrous. It's a big bucks they pay us, yeah. But we have 4 main areas, if you like. we have a quarterly meeting with all heads of service and the director of housing. So we get all the service areas figures. They used to be on a, green, amber, red sort of thing. They've got very fancy technically wise, but it's basically the same thing. So we would look at it and we ask questions. Meetings can get quite interesting. And we say, right, we would like a more in-depth response to why that's not working at the moment. If we get 2 quarterly meetings where figures are going down, then that is like a little ping for us to start having a look at it. There are other tenant groups in Swindon. There's a sheltered housing group, there's Swindon Tenant Voice, and they might actually refer things to us and contact us and say, well, we're not happy with this, that. Again, we are sometimes asked by the council themselves to look at certain aspects of, the ongoing thing with repairs and voids, and that will give us a parameter just to see how we view it. And what we're trying to do at the moment, and I wish my colleague Emily was here because she could tell you far more about it. We basically like to get out into the community ourselves. So we might turn up at the what we call the one-stop shop, which is where people come into the council, etc. And we might just rock up there and start asking people why they're there, what they're unhappy with, etc., etc. We have a good thing going now. We've got some community cafes set up, which usually in libraries and places like that, but where whole communities across an age spectrum can come in and they have a meal and they have coffee, etc. We'll turn up and, along with the credit union and various other ecology groups, and people are free to come and ask us questions, because we feel that part of tenant scrutiny should be trying to develop the community, to give them that greater access, to let them know, hi, we exist, you can come to us. We can't guarantee to solve it, but we can certainly point you in the right direction to get it solved. As I said earlier, we generally have a very good relationship with the council. We will have our own meetings, but we can ask council officers to sit in, who basically sort of take little minutes, and there are, I can say this because I'm not tuned in, there are gophers. If we want to find out something, we say, we need to know that. Can you make sure we have it by our next meeting? And generally, they're pretty good. I suppose one of our problems were 2. One, from a council point of view, is that, we have all our terms laid down, etc., etc., and we like to flex a little bit, and sometimes, and they say, oh, but that's not quite in your remit. And we'll say, no, but not really. But if you look at it from this point of view, it could be, and we might really be tempted to have a look at that. So we have those little jousts now and again, but generally we do have a good ongoing relationship with them. We have direct access to our cabinet member for housing, who we get on well with, and we can get things put in place if we can prove their worth, and it's not going to cost the council too much money. But our main problem is recruiting.
Yeah.
Because you've got time, etc., to do it. And it's difficult for people who've got children in school and, etc., etc.
I think that's a really interesting point, Phil, and I think a lot of people involved in scrutiny will sort of that will resonate with them, and they'll sort of empathise with that recruitment issue. But I think what I'd love to sort of just pull out from that conversation is your work as a panel to connect with the wider tenant base in the community, because that sounds like a very strong element of your scrutiny, and I think that's something I'd like to maybe pick up with the rest of the panel, in terms of how does your community know that scrutiny panels exist, how do they connect with it? And Phil's described maybe how that happens in Swindon. Has anybody got any other examples, particularly of how Scrutiny in their bit of the world connects with the wider community? Have we got? Yeah, Rachel, you've got your hand up.
So an element of what we do with our scrutiny is when our scrutiny panel is approaching a new review and they want to gather data and insight from the wider tenant voice. So it's, you know, not just the 6 in the room, it's getting opinions from the whole tenant base. We have a group of tenants on a survey group called Your Voice, and I think currently it's got about 250 tenants on it, and they can answer surveys via email or post. We allow them to post as well. And when we so basically our tenant scrutiny group will write the survey of the key aspects they think, and then they will send the surveys out, and I send it on their behalf as they're, you know, to stop at the admin being so heavy on themselves. But it's very clear this is written by our scrutiny group. They are currently doing a review on whatever it may be, and then all the data gets fed back into their review. So it's hopefully informing our wider tenant voice about this scrutiny group. And then what we actually do is we give them the option to get the feedback. So the people who completed the survey, we can then say, so once the TSG, tenant scrutiny group, have completed their review, we can send you the report and you can have a look over it if you want and see and make any comments, and then that's what we do. It's kind of like a full circle. And we also, which I'm sure a lot of councils do, in our housing annual report, we have like a whole section on our tenant scrutiny group and put little updates on what reviews they've done, and then that obviously all of our tenants get notified when the annual report is ready as well. That's just some of the ways.
Yeah, some fab examples there. I love the fact, you know, they get a mention and a spot in the annual report.
Yeah.
And again, you know, that's really important, isn't it, to show the work that they've done.
Absolutely, because so many hard work and hours go into it. We want to make sure that it's, you know, credited and seen. And also that report goes to our staff as well. So maybe some of the staff that weren't involved in those reviews can also see the work the TSG have done as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you for that, Rachel. Really interesting. I'm going to come to Justin. Justin's going to tell us a bit more about the process in terms of how they do things at North West Leicestershire. So over to you, Justin.
Yeah, before I go into that, can I just go back to what Phil and Rachel were saying and what we do in terms of the scrutiny panel engaging with the wider kind of community. What North West Leicestershire, what we do every summer, we haven't done them this year for obvious reasons, but we do about 15 pop-up events over the summer. And that's, for us, a pop-up event is when we target about 150 properties. We spend about an hour and a half, and we basically go knocking on doors, asking people how's things, what you do, and what's good, what's bad. And we bring our scrutiny panel members on those pop-ups with us, and they will introduce themselves as panel members, talk about what they do. So it's just a way of promoting their work and engaging with the wider tenant kind of population. And then in terms of our process, initially we've got terms of reference, so that kind of guides us in terms of how the panel should operate. We have what we refer to as formal monthly meetings, and those meetings are attended by our Director of Housing and also our portfolio holder for housing. And they're more of we also service those meetings with admin, so we minute those meetings, we keep a record of those minutes, and they're just basically a way of identifying what the inspection topics are going to be. So at those meetings, we look at Housemark data, we look at our own KPIs. The Director of Housing will talk about what his issues and what his concerns are, as will the portfolio holder. And that's how like the topics of what they're going to do is identified. But then the actual work takes place in what we call working meetings. And they're meetings that the panel set up themselves. They can set them up, they can go to a cafe, they can go to a pub, they can go to a hotel, and they can have their own meetings. They often invite me to those meetings, but they can have them without me as well. You know, so and that's where they do the work. That's where they decide what they're going to do in terms of the inspection. But at the very first point of the inspection, once the topic has been identified and agreed, we'll do a scoping exercise. So we usually will invite someone else in, a trainer, a specialist trainer on that topic, to come in and do a day's session with the panel around that topic. So, for instance, when we did an inspection of ASB, we got a specialist of ASB to come in and talk about what ASB, how we deal with it and stuff like that. And that's how we scope out the inspection. And that gives us a project plan. And then we kind of create a plan from that and then just follow that plan through. And it can be anything from meeting with tenants, meeting with officers, shadowing work, anything really that we can support, the panel will decide to do, and then they follow that process. Then they'll write a report, a formal report with recommendations. But before we get to that point, we will meet with the relevant managers and discuss those recommendations to make sure they're realistic. We don't want to be making recommendations that aren't going to be possible. And then the formal report goes to Cabinet, and if approved, we develop an action plan and implement the recommendations, basically. So that's the process in a nutshell.
Excellent. No, really clear process in place there, Justin. And I love the fact that you invest in bringing in maybe a specialist or an expert in that particular topic, and spending a day with the scrutiny panel so they really understand. We
give our scrutiny panel a budget. So they have an annual budget of £8,000, and that budget is used for the training. So the panel will decide who they want to train, and they have the money to pay for that. So which is quite good, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really healthy budget, and it's great to see, you know, that that's been invested directly into the scrutiny and they can make use of that. So yeah, fantastic, really interesting. Thank you for that. So we've had some really good ideas around connecting back to the community, this idea of pop-ups and talking about surveys, you know, and we've heard from Phil about the work that they do out in the communities as well. So I think it's really good to see that scrutiny is connecting back with the wider customer, resident, tenant base, because ultimately it has to reflect what's going off there for it to be meaningful and purposeful. So brilliant to hear that today. And I guess it maybe brings us on a little bit to Nicola's point when she first opened around the diversity of panels. And sometimes I hear a debate about, well, if you've got a core group of people, do they necessarily have to represent your tenant group or reflect your tenant group, should I say, in terms of diversity, as long as they're reaching out to the communities and listening to all, you know, sort of aspects, all sort of, you know, the diversity within that community. So I'd be interested to get your views on it. I mean, Nicola, I don't know whether you wanted to come in on that, because I know you talked about it earlier, you know, how you feel about if they're connecting well with their communities, they don't necessarily have to be reflective in terms of a panel. What do you think?
I think, because I don't know if anyone else is in London, but you can appreciate that there is a big mix of different cultures, etc. And we find that a lot of people do gravitate to certain cultures and religions and so forth. So it was for that particular reason. But you're right, it doesn't necessarily mean that because I'm black, I can't, you know, mix with white people, for example. That's not solely not the case. We're all human beings at the end of the day, but it's just for particular purposes. You will need that for language barriers, etc. You understand? And yeah, just to reflect certain things that are going on, certain projects that are going on at that particular time.
Yeah, and it's a good point about, you know, obviously where you are in terms of, you know, geography and the rich diversity that you have in London, that sometimes can bring with it, I guess, different challenges that maybe other groups across the country perhaps don't have. So yeah, it's interesting to get that perspective. Thank you for that, Nicola.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, so we've heard a little bit about the processes. I want to just move on now to another one of Dr. McKenna's keys to successful scrutiny. And I want to talk a little bit about role and recognition, because in the report, you know, it's quite clear how important it is really for scrutiny to be integrated into the structure of the organisation, into how it operates. And what I mean by that is how it connects with the cabinet, the council's cabinet, how it maybe connects with the council's own scrutiny panel, and how it connects with senior management as well. So I wonder if anybody's got sort of any examples in terms of where they're at with that in their organisation, or any tips that they can give people if they're not quite there, because that connection and getting that role and recognition of scrutiny is absolutely critical, I think, to making it successful. So any thoughts on that from anybody? Nev, come to you first and then to Claire.
Yeah, we actually meet, well, pre-COVID we did anyway. We actually meet with our council scrutiny every 3 months, and we issue them, they have the paperwork of what we've been up to and all the rest of it, and we've had 2 actual meetings with them now. It's fairly new, this liaison, shall I say, but we're finding it very good.
Yeah.
It's nice to see your councillors come in. You see, the difference is, normally, when you're on the hot seat, right, when you go through council scrutiny, you're only in there maybe a case before yours, right? But we're set there all the time, right? We don't speak, we don't raise questions. We could be asked a question, could be thrown out to us, and we don't actually go on the hot seat while they end, right? While they've finished all the other cases. And then I'll look at ours, and then we have a free-for-all. They ask us what we found out about so-and-so. Did you get this, that, and the other? And you find it integrates very well with what they're doing. And
Yeah.
they realised, it took them some time to realise, the whole of Tenants Forum, all the groups, do their own scrutiny in a way. We have a full scrutiny group which specialises on particular cases, but they all recognise to their own service, like the MSL, what's the cleaning doing, what's happening with the HFOs, you know, the housing officers that look after the place. So by and large, it's worked very well. And we're very welcome there, you know what I mean?
Excellent. I mean, that seems quite sort of trailblazing, that, to be honest with you. I've certainly not heard of that happening in many local authorities where you have the tenant-led group meeting with the council or led scrutiny group and actually, you know, sort of looking at what each other's doing and maybe sort of sharing information and coordinating things. So I think that's a real strong example of how it is embedded within the organisation and has that real role and recognition. So thank you for sharing that, Nev. Hats off to Hull. I think that's really interesting. I've got a hand up from Simon, but I think I said I was going to come to Claire first, and then I will come to Simon next. So Claire, you first.
Thank you. Yeah, as I referred to earlier, the resident involvement group, our main top level group, will help decide what areas are to be reviewed, and then the task and finish group will be set up as a separate group from them. They're supported by the engagement team and by lead officers within that area to come to their conclusions and make their recommendations, which are then put into a report. That report goes to the resident involvement group for their comments and to be able to feed into those recommendations. The report also goes to our housing management team as well for them to comment on. Then all the reports go to our housing performance group, which is a working group of councillors and tenants. Some of those tenants do sit on the resident involvement group as well. And where needed, depending on the recommendations that are being made, the report can also go to our housing committee as well. So they don't come together, as Nev was saying his do, but they are all part of that process.
Brilliant. And you can see that, can't you, how it kind of fuses together, all right, maybe not in the same way as Hull does, but there's a clear structure there and clear formality when it comes to scrutiny and how that works with the other bits of the organisation. So yeah, great, thanks.
And I'll just say the councillors really, they give so much positive feedback on the tenants' involvement with it, and they really appreciate getting those views into the service improvements. So it's a really good relationship there.
Fabulous, thank you for that. Simon, I'm going to come to you next.
Thank you. Just on the back of what one of my colleagues just mentioned a little bit earlier, our customer scrutiny panel group, they finalised their report, like it has already been mentioned, but they also present to committee as well. And I think just what one of the gentlemen just said a little bit earlier, things were getting a little bit mixed up in large committees. So what's happened in the last couple of months from our organisation is a committee's been created, which is solely responsible to link with the customer scrutiny panel. So they get the whole like 1.5 to 2 hour slot which is fabulous, because I think that just shows the high level of commitment, not only from us, but from the council as well, which is a really good thing. And then they they present the report. We don't present the report, which I think is a really positive thing. Just makes it a bit more real, I think. Absolutely. And again, as you say, it needs that investment from the council and the councillors to make that happen, but allocating that slot and that specialist sort of committee, if you like, and making sure that, you know, the scrutineers can present themselves, it all adds in, doesn't it, to strengthening that role and recognition, which is so important. Thank you for that, Simon. I've got Mary, and then I'll come to Rachel. Oh, sorry, Mary, I've just got you on mute at the moment.
That's it, sorry. We send our reports to tenant engagement group, quality standards, improving places, and all councillors in Rotherham get a monthly report as well. So that's what we do.
Yeah. Great, Mary. Do you think that they look at it? Do you get the feeling that
So we get some really good feedback, yeah.
Good.
And they're all, I mean, they're all tenant led, you know, these groups that we got to,
Yeah, brilliant. That's great, Mary. Thank you for that. Rachel, to yourself next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have a group set up called the Landlord Services Committee, and sat on that is the portfolio holder for housing, as well as other councillors, and also the head of housing and other senior managers in housing. And a couple of the nominated members from our tenant scrutiny group sit on that panel, and they meet once every quarter. And all of our TSG reports go to there, and they're presented at the Landlord Services Committee. We get them ahead of time to read and make any comments. But this committee isn't just set up for our tenant scrutiny group. All our, you know, if there's significant reports of changes that happen into service within the housing department, they all go to that. So this scrutiny members, I've said it's been really beneficial, because if there's a change happening to repairs or rent, they are sat on this panel and see the head of service present the reports and talk about the changes. And it also gives a great opportunity for councillors to speak to the TSG members and ask about how they found the review and things like that. And we also include the action plans, so it kind of puts that bit more accountability on the service as well, because we make sure completion dates are included. So if we said these recommendations are going to be completed in 4 months, at any time, and it has happened, a councillor on that, you know, in a couple of meetings time could say, can we see the action plan update for the TSG report from 2 quarters ago? And it gives that accountability and things like that from, and it's a good way for the TSG to monitor it as well. So it seems to be like a well-rounded approach, and it's got that kind of credibility higher in the organisation, as I say, because councillors sit on it and things like that.
Yeah, no, you can see that from how you've explained how it works. And what I also like as well is the fact that it starts to build relationships and trust, doesn't it, as well? Yeah. Because I think you can embed things and make things part as, you know, of the process and until the cows come home, I think, in some ways. But it needs that relationship, that trust, that partnership to actually make it happen, doesn't it? And you've described how that's done, you know, in terms of bringing people together from the officer, the councillor side and the tenant side perfectly. So thank you for that, Rachel.
Not a problem.
Okay, I know we've got people at a very early stage of their scrutiny journey. I think it was Eileen and Nicola and Maureen. I just wondered from yourselves potentially, have you thought about how maybe your the scrutiny panels are going to get that role and recognition and integrate maybe with the cabinet or the committee or management? I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that maybe from, I don't know, should we go to Eileen first? Any thoughts on that at all, Eileen?
We've been within council for just over 4 years, and in the beginning when we first went in, we did try and have a scrutiny panel. We set one up and trying to connect with the councillors, but it didn't quite work out as well as we expected. So we've gone right back to the basics. We've pulled everything back, and we've got what we call the Tenants Alliance group now. So through those guys, they'll be doing most of the scrutiny of the services, hopefully in the next few months, once they've got a bit more training, because we've got new members, so we need to bring them up to speed. We do have a problem still with recruiting new members, but now that we've gone more using digital methods. I'm hoping to be able to connect to the wider tenants panel, because we've got a lot of rural areas that we haven't tapped into yet. So we've got quite a bit of work to do yet before we can get up and running.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? You know, with Scrutiny, if things don't work, it's just about trying something different. And as you say, the digital approach potentially can hopefully expand, you know, the number of people perhaps who will get engaged with Scrutiny. So it's good to hear that you're sort of trying things differently and going back to basics. Thank you for that, Eileen. I don't know whether, Nicola, you wanted to maybe talk a little bit. Yeah, I've got you, Nev. I'll come to you in a second, no worries. I'm just going to go to Nicola and Maureen first, just to maybe talk a little bit about what their sort of aspirations are with this particular part of Scrutiny.
Yeah, I mean, for my self, even just listening to certain things here today, I'm going to even set up like a WhatsApp group with the panel, and even let them listen to this video, because there's a lot of things that they can learn from there, including myself, because I'm actually new to the role as well. So hence the reason why I even got in contact with TPAS as well, because we're all crying out for training. So that's like getting back to basics with training, obviously, even like introducing them to the counsellors, etc. So I'm going to take that away as well, so we can work effectively. And yeah, just to start looking at, you know, holistically all the things that we should be accountable for in terms of our KPIs, etc. So a new revised action plans based on our KPIs, and obviously introducing them to different departments, the mystery shopping, the task and action groups, etc. So I'm learning a lot as I'm listening.
Brilliant. And it's great, you know, it's scary when you're starting out, isn't it? But in some ways it's really exciting as well, and it's coming through your sort of your enthusiasm and sort of passion for it. So I'm sure everybody's, you know, wishing you well, and I'm more than happy to help you where they can. So thanks for that, Nicola. Maureen, what about yourself in Luton? How do you see this part of Scrutiny maybe developing there?
So sorry, just unmute myself. Sorry, I had technical issues. I had to from one device to another, so I might have missed a bit in the middle.
No worries.
I think listening to the conversations, the main thing I would like to see happen is a much stronger link to the council through the cabinet and through the scrutiny panel. And I think one of the ideas that I heard just before I got cut off from the person there, I think it was Nev, where they're meeting them quarterly. I think that's what I need to push for. We have got a really strong link with our cabinet member for housing, but we need to widen that, let's put it that way. So yes, that's what I would like to see happen. And I think some of the ideas today about some of the stuff that we do out in the community, it's making sure that we use every opportunity to push what the scrutiny panel are doing and how other people are involved in that. And I don't think currently we do that all the time. So yes, that's how I'd see it developing.
Brilliant. Yeah, some good ideas in terms of taking forward things you want to do there, Maureen, and you know, I'll bring Nevin in a second, because I think, you know, that idea of just having those regular meetings potentially with the council's scrutiny committee can be something to be worked on, and maybe you'll have to let us know how you get on with those. So thank you for that, Maureen. Okay, Nev, your turn.
Just a quickie. You got me. Just a quickie for the newer groups. You'll do a piece of work, right? You look at something and you'll save them money. They'll want to get to know you then. They will. Now, to Maureen, who just spoke, your portfolio holder for housing, he's got to get involved with you. Shut up, phone. He's got to get involved with you, right? The other councillors, they tend to shy away. Half of them don't know what you do, right? When you do get involved with the scrutiny, you're getting involved with the council scrutiny, you're getting involved with a far range and politically different people. And the word gets on of what the tenants are doing. And it's one way of promoting yourselves. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nev. And you know, it's a fair point, isn't it? I guess one of the top tips is if your scrutiny can save money, you know, fantastic, shout about it, tell everybody about it, and then everybody, even the accountants and the financial people, become interested in it, don't they? So that's Nev's top tip: save some money and get your counsellors all wanting to know you. Absolutely, I love that. Thank you for that. Okay, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've just touched on, you know, these sort of outcomes of scrutiny. And I just want to maybe for the last sort of 10, 15 minutes or so, just take us along that road a little bit. Because I think one of the key things when it comes to scrutiny is that it has to make a difference, doesn't it? Because there's no point doing it if it doesn't. So I think we're all clear about that. But I think it's maybe about how do we track the recommendations. So it's no good saying, oh, you know, we made 10 recommendations. Great, but what happened to them? Where did they go? So how do we track them? And also, how do we actually then make sure we capture them and tell people about them as well? Because I think, again, that's so important for recruitment, absolutely, but also to show other people that the scrutiny panel is value for money and it's doing a good job. So does anybody want to kick us off on that discussion around tracking? Phil, over to yourself. Oh, just got you on mute again at the moment, Phil. Keep trying, it'll work. Keep pressing those buttons.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes by way of a question to the other groups as much as anything. We, in Swindon, we're actually in the next week or so going to launch our own tenant scrutiny panel Facebook page, so that we can actually put our reports, which we submit to council, out there for everybody to see. And I'm just wondering, are any of the other groups, do they already have a sort of Facebook set up? And if so, do they find it useful? Is it productive? You know, I'm just curious. It's a big step for us. We've just managed to squeeze council finances and get, you know, because we take part in a lot of meetings with them online like this one. So we've got them to boost our equipment a little bit, shall we say. But it's a new area and Facebook has its problems, we all know. But we're living in the time where so many people more would look at Facebook than they would look at a survey report that comes through with the rest of the stuff in the council. So I'd be really curious to know if other people are doing it, and if they are, how successful it is.
Okay, so that means now we've got 3 questions to throw out to people. How do you track how do you track your outcomes? Do you use Facebook? And maybe how do you promote your outcomes? Which does tie into that, Phil, you're right. So anybody wants to tell us about how they track their outcomes? Justin, over to yourself.
So when we have gone to Cabinet with our report and we've got our recommendations, as I mentioned earlier on, we produce an action plan. And the action plan details each recommendation, how we're going to achieve the recommendation, and who's responsible for it, and when it's due to be done. And the date part, we use a traffic light system. So if it's still within target, it's green. If it's getting a bit close, it's amber, and if it's over target, it's red. So I'm sure we're all familiar with that. So we produce that annual report, we produce that action plan, and we try and have just one manager responsible for all of the recommendations to keep it straightforward. Even if they aren't necessarily going to carry out the actions, they would be responsible for making sure the actions are carried out. So that manager is then, we then diarise quarterly. They will attend, I mentioned earlier on, the formal meetings. So the manager will be expected to attend those formal meetings at least quarterly to update the panel in terms of where we are with the actions, and if we are running over, why, and then the panel might agree to change the dates, etc., like that. And they will continue to come every quarter until every action is green. And then what we'll do then is, about a year later, we'll go back and have a look at it and see, has it made a difference? What's the impact? Are they still going ahead? So that's how we track it. The scrutiny panel don't have a Facebook page. We have a housing Facebook page that we would use to promote some scrutiny stuff on as well, but we don't actually have a scrutiny Facebook page, but it's an interesting idea. And And I think where we probably could get better at is saying what scrutiny has done and the impacts and outcomes of that. And I think that's something that we recognise that we don't do very well in terms of shouting about the good work that scrutiny does. We do use our tenant newsletters. We will use our website. All our reports are published on our website for everyone to see. So I think that's something that we need to get better at. But that's our tracking process on Facebook, etc.
Yeah. No, again, it's really interesting that you don't seem to let go of things, and I like that. I like the fact that nobody escapes unless it's turned green, and that's got to be a good place to be. Absolutely. Thank you.
I think the panel also recognised that sometimes the dates will change. Sometimes we won't achieve it on time, and that's okay. That's not a problem as long as we're honest and transparent about it, and explain to the panel why we haven't achieved it, but we're planning on achieving it at this new date, and that will always have to be agreed by the panel, like, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else want to come in? Maureen, and I think Mary as well. So I'll come to Maureen and then to Mary.
I just wanted to raise a question, really. Sorry to do this. Obviously, you get a report with the recommendations on it. Sometimes the staff can't meet all those recommendations for one reason or another. So we're talking about the report goes to whoever goes to with its recommendations, and we're monitoring it afterwards. But surely sometimes, I want to play devil's advocate here, we can't meet a particular recommendation. Do we just take it off, or do you leave it there, or what do you do with it if it's not actually going to happen? Because sometimes what we think should happen and probably should happen either costs too much money, or it's just not possible due to the law or something else. Sorry, I thought I'd just raise a question.
No, it's a good point, Maureen, and I think one we'll explore a little bit more. I mean, I don't know if anybody particularly wants to come back on that. Maybe Justin and Claire are indicating perhaps that they want to. So I'll bring Claire in first, and then I'll go to Justin.
With all our task and finish groups, there's somebody from the engagement team that's supporting the group, so around their role and how they can get involved. But I think it's also key to have somebody, a manager, a lead officer from the service area being reviewed, so they can input into expectations and recommendations. So when you get into the stage of the final report, if there's anything that it isn't going to be achievable for whatever reason, whether it's resources, cost, but financial, they can guide the group on that and make sure by the time the report's drafted that those recommendations are realistic and can be taken forward.
Yeah, thanks for that, Claire. Justin, do you want to come in?
Just to echo what Claire said, we do the same thing. The panel will come up with their recommendations, but the panel, we have to kind of recognise the partnership between the council and the panel. So the panel will come up with their recommendations, but the panel need to know, are these recommendations realistic? So we'll have a reality check. So we'll have the relevant managers come in to look over those recommendations before they've gone anywhere, before anyone's seen them. And the relevant managers say, yeah, we can do that. No, we can't do that. And we can't do that. Why? And this is a reason. So they're all reality checks. So we're very confident that we can achieve them before they even get to cabinet, because we've checked them, we've reality checked them. And that's how we ensure that happens.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting point, isn't it? And I think, you know, most scrutineers know when, you know, people are sort of trying to pull the wool over their eyes in terms of a recommendation. But I think if it's explained why, the decision making, the finances maybe around it, I think most tenant scrutineers will accept that. I think it becomes an issue sometimes when the culture and the relationship's not right, that perhaps, you know, they are being fobbed off. And you know, not often that happens, but when it does, definitely scrutineers will need to stand their ground sometimes. And, you know, I think we'd only expect them to do that. It may be that the recommendation stays in the report, but with a note saying why it couldn't be taken forward. So I think, again, it's about that partnership working, as people have said.
And can I just say as well that we have had a couple of times when we've had managers come in and say to the scrutiny panel, okay, that recommendation links with that one, so I think you should combine that into one recommendation. And I think that's a good thing as well, that maybe the panel wouldn't recognise because they don't necessarily know the operations of the service, but when the manager comes in and says, yeah, that works with that, and links to them, so we can reduce the recommendations. Well, there was one report we started off with 12 recommendations, and we reduced that down to 8, but we didn't lose anything. They were just combined, and that was on the advice of the managers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that can be helpful, definitely. Thank you for that, Justin. Mary, I know I've got you to come to, but I'm just, if Rachel, if your point is on what we're talking about, I will come to you first.
Mine
Well,
is.
yours is as well, Mary. Right, we'll come to Mary first and then you, Rachel.
Well, can I just say that we, Rotherford, do scrutiny on behalf of the council. And then our report includes recommendations that go to Cabinet, then go back to Rotherford, because we actually work closely with them. So then that's how ours get passed on. You don't just die in dust, you know, because we have got a close working relationship. And for Phil, about Facebook, Rotherham Federation, I've got a Facebook page, and so have the council, and it does seem to work because we put our good news stories out there. Our community workers, they've all got a page and they all put stories out, and this is how we pass things on, as well as the council send a 4-yearly magazine out to tenants, and we send reports out as well. So that's how we get things out there.
Brilliant. Some really good examples there, Mary. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm going to go to Rachel now.
Yeah, all I was going to add is picking up what Justin said. We meet with the managers of the team before they go to our, heads of departments and things like that, and the Landlord Services Committee. But sometimes there are things like, because of IT systems, that recommendations can't be done. But sometimes if the tenant screening group and sometimes the officers involved still feel that it's an important recommendation that's been highlighted. So we actually had in a couple of our reports on different reviews, recommendation about maybe an ICT system communicating with another one. And then when our TSG did a repairs review, because we were going out to 10 different new contracts, so they scrutinised our current service, and recommendations from that got put into the new tender. And part of that, because we had the evidence of other reviews, part of this whole new process being built was that these systems had to talk to each other. So even though in previous reviews there was comments saying, this won't be achieved because of X, Y, and Z, the kind of evidence of having that recommendation in multiple scrutiny review reports and the evidence behind that actually then led to more like quantifiable evidence for the money to be put into this, because we're having a new repair service put into place anyway, so with a new contractor. So sometimes I do think it is important still, even if it can't be made and everyone agrees it can't be done at that current time, it's still important to capture that recommendation and capture the reasons behind it. So it's just
absolutely, yeah. I think that's a really key point, Rachel, isn't it? Capturing that information as well, so people can see it is open, it is transparent, and people can see very clearly why decisions have been made. So I like the idea, definitely.
And it could lead to changes in a couple of years' time, not necessarily now, but down the line. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, we've sort of been going for just 10 minutes over an hour, so I'm going to start trying to sort of maybe bring things together a little bit in terms of this session, and see whether there's anything that you yourselves wanted to mention. But I think what's come across to me loud and clear this afternoon is good scrutiny needs good relationships, it needs good trust, it needs good partnership working. And I think once you've got that in place, it's incredible how scrutiny grows and develops. And I think, a lot of examples we've been hearing today is about how partnership working is working fantastically well, and also how good scrutiny is connecting back out with the wider tenant base. Some fabulous examples of that as well, and seeing that in action is great. So I think those are the two things that are really standing out to me. Obviously lots of other good stuff as well that I'm hearing today. But I'm just going to throw in a question before I do hand it over to yourselves, and ask you about your colleagues in the housing association world, because we heard from Dr. McKenna this morning that there are a lot of similarities in terms of the scrutiny that happens in that sector and the scrutiny that happens in the local authority sector, but clearly there are differences as well. But do you think that, in terms of going forward, we could see more collaboration between councils and housing associations when it comes to scrutiny? I'm thinking particularly maybe of issues that affect, multi-tenure estates, or maybe, you know, sort of services that cross-cut, you know, maybe grounds maintenance, things like that. Do people see more collaboration either in scrutiny functions or maybe just sharing good practice? Do we have any thoughts on that, so we can send a message to our colleagues in the housing association world as well? Phil, you had your hand up, I think.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can indeed, yes.
Great. Just we, you know, before COVID and everything, we used to hold a networking event once a year. We'd host a networking event in Swindon. The scrutiny panel would do this. Now, we didn't only invite along other council scrutiny panels. We did have housing association scrutiny panels actually come in. And that crossover of ideas, there are common areas. I mean, for example, one of the things that we're looking at quietly at the moment is on mutual exchanges, because some of those mutual exchanges happen between housing association tenants and council tenants. So we're trying to see the perspective from both ends for the good practice and how it works, etc., etc. But housing associations have the same problems as we do. Their tenant groups have. I mean, sadly, there was a group in Bath who we used to work with, and I won't mention any names because some of it's in court, but there was a group in Bath who were the scrutiny panel for a housing association, and they did their job too well, and the housing association got rid of it. That housing association's idea of tenant involvement now is to take 6 to 8 tenants at random every 3 months, phone them up, do a tick box, and that's their tenant involvement. So, you know, we all have the same problems, so there's no reason not to join forces for good practice, for ideas, what works, what doesn't work, you know. We fiercely maintain our independence, but, you know, there are other groups out there who are doing good work who just happen to be doing it within housing associations. So why not?
Yeah, brilliant. Well said, Phil. And I think a lot of people nodding there and agreeing with that sentiment as well. Anybody else want to add anything to that discussion, or I think we'll yeah, Justin.
Just quickly, I think in terms of housing associations, I think we've as a panel we've had some issues before where because obviously a housing association does housing and that's all they do. As a local authority, we do housing and we do other things. So we've got 2 accounts, as you all know. But sometimes our panel have found it quite frustrating that they want to make recommendations about things outside of the housing revenue account. And we have to say it's kind of out of your remit. And that can be quite a challenge for us sometimes, like, you know what I mean? And I think housing associations don't tend to have that because that they do housing, that's all they do. And that's just an observation that I've had in terms of that. But here in the East Midlands, we have set up a resident involvement networking group for officers across the region, and that's attended by local authorities and housing associations. That's open to everybody, and we come together and we share good practice. And we had an event last year which focused on scrutiny, where we all just came together and just spent a day kind of talking about it. It was mainly officers, and it was just a good way of kind of sharing good practice, like, you know. So they're just my observations.
I think that's a great point, you know, and certainly at TPAS, you know, that is our intentions, to make sure we bring everybody together to share good practice. You know, we've got our workplace Facebook group for tenant scrutineers, and we've got one for officers. And, you know, obviously National Scrutiny Week has been about celebrating all kinds of scrutiny. I think what's great today is that we've managed to bring people together from the local authority sector to really sort of detail what their challenges and what the opportunities are, what the good practice is, and really start learning and networking from each other. So I think it's been a really successful session today. I've certainly enjoyed it. Before I close though, I just want to ask whether anybody's got anything that they want to add to finish today's session off. Anybody got any more questions or any more comments? Simon?
I would just like to say, in terms of the group that I work with and the people that I work with, is don't underestimate people, particularly, I know that sounds fairly obvious, but in terms of people that we work with who tend to get to that level, who commit to a customer scrutiny group, it's a lot of work and very intense. And I think that I'm never cease to be astounded, even though I've known these people for a long time. You know, they'll walk into a room and have a conversation with the managing director where you think you might have to give them a little bit of prep in advance, and you just need to get to know what their skill set is, which again, I know sounds obvious, but I think just don't underestimate the customers that you're working with, because you've got to get to know them. And I think one of the things that we did was understanding differences in people. We did like an away day with the panel, and I think that helped them as well as individuals to find out about their own learning styles and how they reacted to things as well.
Yeah. Great. I think that's a perfect note to end on, in terms of not underestimating the power of scrutiny and the influence of scrutineers, because I think, you know, what's shown us so far during Scrutiny Week is the absolute massive amount of work that's been done out there across the country when it comes to scrutiny. So I think to focus on that as the closing point, Simon, is really powerful and very poignant. So thank you for that. Just want to give Justin the last word, because they have been our kind hosts today. So Justin, I don't know if you just want to say a few words to wrap us up, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say something to there's a few new scrutiny panels being set up, like, yeah. So what I'd say to you, it's really, really important is to get sponsorship from senior in the organization, someone who is on your side, who is senior, who will push people to get information. Sometimes you might find a blockage where you've come to a member of staff and you're looking for some information, you're not going to get it. Having that sponsor upstairs can be really beneficial. So I'd say that's really important for you to focus on. I think I've really enjoyed today. There's some really good ideas. I've been making notes here of things. I think I'm going to be looking at setting up a scrutiny panel Facebook page, maybe. You know, so I've really enjoyed it. I think, yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant.
It's been great.
Excellent. I'd like to say thank you to you all, and just remind everybody about this report that you can now download from our website, Successful Scrutiny for Council Tenants, written by the fab Dr. Dave McKenna, otherwise known as the Scrutiny Geek, I think. It's well worth a read. It's got lots of practical advice, lots of practical tips and case studies, and a big thank you to the people who contributed to that, and to yourselves for today. Enjoy the rest of Scrutiny Week, everyone. Look after yourselves, and we hope to see you again soon at a TPAS event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.